You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com.
Hello and welcome back to episode 63 of the TV Obsessive podcast. My name is Ryan Kirksey. I'm a writer and contributor for TVObsessive.com. And once again, joined by Cameron Crane, executive editor for the site. Cameron, I'm sorry to say, we'll talk about this later, but it's not Christmas in August. I don't know what to tell you.
No, well, that's okay. It's August
Yeah,
23rd. We got a
we'll
little
get
bit of
there.
summer left. A little bit of summer left. It's been pretty nice here. How's it been in Texas? Too hot?
Hottest of the year, 100 degrees, but relief is coming. We're going to be in the low 90s next week.
Oh, we've been in like the 80s, and then we're going to be back in the 90s next week. So, level out. I much prefer it when it's like low 80s. It gets
Yes.
in the 90s a bit much, but
Well, we may
anyway.
reference Santa Claus later in this episode. We'll see if that comes up.
Oh yes, I definitely will. I made a promise every week. So we're going to be wrapping up our coverage of Lady in the Lake on Apple TV Plus. The latter part of the podcast here today, talking about episode 7, the series finale. I'd be very surprised if they made a second season of this. Very much seems like a limited series, but that doesn't always stop these TV executives. So we'll see. But I presume this is the series
I
finale.
think we're going to talk about something later that I would have bet money that there would have been a second season, and there will not be. So who knows what's going on over there?
Right. I'm just saying, on the other hand, they'll tell us Big Little Lies is a limited series and then decide to make more or
Yeah.
um, various things like that. But I'd be really surprised here. Anyway, we'll talk about why later. First, as per usual, talk a bit about what's been in the news this week and so on. So it's August 23rd. What caught your eye this week, Ryan?
Yeah, well, maybe just follow along what I referenced just a moment ago. We could start with news that the Disney Plus series, The Acolyte, in the Star Wars universe was canceled after one season. Interesting that this was officially canceled, whereas shows like, say, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, there has, been statements that likely not making a second season, but no official announcement of a cancellation. They've come out and said this is canceled after one season. And I chalk this up to, we've talked about this before, you just can't make Star Wars fans happy anymore. I mean, this was a unique story, a different viewpoint of what we've seen in the past 40 years. Manny Jacinto was a great character in this show. Um, Liked a lot of pieces of it. Some of it didn't work for me, but it was at least a unique, fresh take on some of the Star Wars universe. But so many complaints, so much backlash. It's just been axed. I mean, quickly.
I guess that's why. When you watch this series, I did not watch this series. Longtime listeners of the podcast will get the background. I don't want to, 30. I don't watch stuff like this for whatever reason. Anymore. Anyway, anyhow, now I'm saying more than I intended to on that front. But did it feel to you like it was meaningfully left open as though the creators of the Acolyte were have in mind ideas for season 2? I'm wondering if that's why they went to the
Yes.
length
And
of canceling it.
the reason why I think it came as such a surprise to me, not because I'm surprised anymore by the criticism that these shows and projects get from quote unquote hardcore Star Wars fans, but that in the finale, one very specific thing shown and teased that this is sort of a jumping off point into the universe that we know. And there's long since been stories told in books and graphic novels about this thing. It'd be very easy to just move from what they showed into that story. And they did certainly tease it, but it's not going forward.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just wondering because it did feel like it got a mixed reception. It did seem to me like
Hmm.
some people did like it, right? So I
Yeah.
don't know, just on your note of them going to the lengths of officially announcing a cancellation, I'm thinking, well, they want people to shut up about it. The people who did like it, they're like, don't clamor, don't ask about when the second season's going to be. It's not going to happen, right? Which,
That's right.
in contrast to a couple of other things you mentioned, right? Like I don't know that anyone's going. I don't know if anyone out there is like, hey, well, when are we going to get another season of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show?
Right. Yeah. No, and I think those type of things, they will never officially close the door in case, Ewan McGregor comes back and says, I'll do it for 10%, whatever. And it's something that they want to put together. But yeah, this one they just gave some finality rather quickly.
Yeah, it does feel to me a little bit from the outside looking in that they're deciding to play it safe. Like you're saying, they can't make Star Wars fans happy, and I think there's something to that. People always
Yeah.
find something to complain about, it seems, when
I
these
think
things
with
come
this
out,
one,
but maybe they just want to like stick to
yeah,
safer ideas. So no to Lando, no
right.
Acolyte.
But this, yeah,
Um,
I what was interesting about this is I actually didn't find it to be very safe in that you did not know any of the characters. It was a story thousands of years before anything that we've seen before. And, it was very Star Warsy in terms of force and lightsaber battles and all that. But yeah, I don't know. It didn't seem like a safe choice. It felt like they were taking the criticism they heard where people said, we need to hear something new and fresh in this universe. We keep seeing the same characters. They did it, and then it got an equally bad response.
yeah, look, to be clear, I'm speculating not that the Acolyte was safe, because from what I've seen about it, I don't think it was, and what you've told me about it, but rather that given the reception of the Acolyte, that now they're canceling it with the thought now that, yeah, we're going to make more Star Wars stuff, but we're going to try to make the most kind of inoffensive Star Wars stuff possible and not take risks on things like more of the Acolyte, or we're not going to do
Yes.
the Lando Calrissian show, right? Which we talked about, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, that is no longer happening either. And
Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption is we're in the process of making all these movies now. We know those are going to make $1 billion. Let's just focus on what's worked.
yeah, something like that. Um, Anyhow, let's go to before we've got a number of upcoming shows and so on, but let's talk about Phil Donahue a little bit. Phil Donahue passed away this past week. Um, Really, I mean, I don't know how I don't know how much I watched Phil Donahue or how much you watched Phil Donahue, but certainly when we were
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah,
his show was on every day.
I was certainly aware of Phil Donahue.
Yeah.
Maybe not was aware of the impact he had that led to a whole genre of television, but certainly was aware of who he was and his sort of the power he had over daytime TV back in the day.
I mean, he was kind of the original daytime talk show,
Yes,
you
yes.
know? And I think by the time that I had any awareness of him, he was already striking me as kind of the quote unquote boring one.
Yeah,
Because he predates Oprah, right? So Oprah is maybe a little bit more exciting, as it were, in terms of
yeah,
the vibes, and then you started getting other stuff going on, like Ricky Lake and of course Jerry
yep.
Springer, and things like this. But I don't know, I was really kind of respected Phil Donahue, and this hasn't been terribly active in recent years.
No, he
Maybe I
has, and I think he's officially retired. It says here in 1996, 6,000 episodes of his show. But you're right. Phil Donahue begat Oprah, who begat Sally Jesse Raphael, who begat Ricky Lake to Maury Povich to The View, all these shows that sort of came from this original host of daytime TV.
Yeah, and then I think he was on MSNBC or something for a little
Hmm.
while in the early aughts and got into I think that people say he got fired because he opposed the Iraq War. Um, so anyway, I don't know. Significant cultural figure,
Yes.
almost feels before our time, even though we're in our 40s, but not quite. Like, yeah, anyway, I definitely thought that was worth hitting on in terms of losing another of these kind of big cultural figures. Um,
Yeah, it certainly was groundbreaking, and things that exist now are a result of what he did back in the early to late 80s, really.
Yeah, and I don't know if you looked at this. I'll put this in the show notes on the website that we put up anyway. A link to this Hollywood Reporter. So it's obituary. Really, it's really long. Goes into a lot of detail about what he did in his life, and I would encourage people to
Yeah.
read that. Um, but yeah, so R.I.P. Phil Donahue. We lost another one. Um, Oprah's still with us. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I can't help the little kind of segue here. Oprah spoke at the
She was with us.
DNC this
Yeah, she was with us last night or this week, actually.
Wednesday night, I think I was. Um, anyway, say more on that later. Other news. We got hitting on something we've hit on before. The show Penelope from Mark Duplass from Duplass Brothers. It's got a release date on Netflix, September 24th. So
Yeah, and when we spoke about this, we didn't know at the time that this was going to be, or did we know that this was going to be a Netflix production? I think when we spoke, they were looking for partners, and to get it on Netflix, I mean, it's phenomenal. I just can't remember what we knew at the time, but yeah, this is great news that we're going to get this in a month.
I think we hit on it when Netflix picked it up.
Ah, okay, okay.
But I don't know. You want to go through our archives? I think we've hit on this a couple times. The first time was that they totally independently produced the show, and then yeah, I think we hit on it when Netflix picked it up, but um, didn't have a release date. Now we've got a release date, September 24th. Pretty soon.
Yeah, yeah, this looks great. And I was rereading the synopsis of this of this show, and as we've talked about before, Mark Duplass has done some incredibly creative things, live action, animation, all sorts of things where he has not only produced, written, starred. So this sort of out of place teenager focusing on this girl named Penelope. This sounds like a very interesting show to me. And yeah, I mean this is great news to get to say literally we're gonna have it a month from now.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking this one out. Um, I don't think Mark Duplass is in it.
No.
Such an interesting figure to me, because he's a well-known actor. I think he might even be. Is he nominated for an Emmy for the morning show? Anyway, he's on the morning show. I know
Oh, I don't know.
that. Maybe he didn't get an Emmy nom, but you know, quite an extensive acting career. Jay Duplass also, right? But then in the background of that, all of this stuff in terms of producing independent films, and here independent television, and really, really kind of interesting guys, the Duplass brothers. Um, Another thing that would be really far out is my other note. New animated series is apparently in the works from Raphael Bob Waxberg. This will be the
Hmm.
creator of BoJack Horseman.
Yeah, now am I the only person in the world who's not seen BoJack Horseman? I understand its
Ah,
popularity and its impact. I feel like I'm missing out here.
you are missing. You're certainly not the only person in the world who's never seen BoJack Horseman. You certainly aren't. But you should watch it because it's
Okay.
very good. It is far better than you would think a show about a talking horse man would have any right to be.
Yeah.
It's like it's really funny. There are visual gags all over the place too. If you do watch it, pay attention. Like every time that there's something in writing on the screen,
Yeah.
there will be a joke there, basically. Like every time. It's really saturated with visual gags in addition to, the spoken dialogue and all of that. And really also hits on some darker themes having to do
Hmm.
with depression and addiction, and there's like a real depth to the show that
Yeah.
you really probably wouldn't imagine if someone just said, hey, here's a show about a talking horse. It's a cartoon. you know
So
um
every time I hear this show reference, it's almost in a sense that people put it, I don't know how you feel about this, put it in sort of the Simpsons, Bob's Burger pantheon of animated shows. I don't know if you considered it that at that level.
I consider it above that level.
Wow. Okay.
I consider it to be better than the show. Or different in the sense of what I was just hitting on, the kind of depth.
Mm,
Like The Simpsons has never made me cry.
right. Right.
So take that as you will. But I'm looking forward to this. No date or anything. I think this is just like a production order kind of thing. This new animated series. It's going to be called Long Story Short. And we'll see. I do think BoJack is quite funny. I never really got into his other show, Tuca and Birdie. Tried to
Mm.
watch it and it just didn't land for me. But he also worked on Undone on Prime Video, which I thought was quite good. Did you ever see that one?
No, I've not seen any of these.
Okay, we should watch that one too. He wasn't really. Undone was co-created by him, and let me just give me 1 second to make sure I get her name right, because I feel like I should mention. Well, that's not. There we go. Yeah, Kate Purdy. For some reason, I was just feeling like I thought I wanted to make sure that I was getting her name right. It's Kate Purdy. But that with Rose Salazar and Bob Odenkirk. It's rotoscope animation. You know what I'm talking about?
Okay.
Like Waking Life. Anyway, I'm a fan of Raphael Bob Walker. I also used to enjoy following him on Twitter. I don't think he's active anymore, and
Yeah.
he hasn't popped up on Blue Sky or anything like that either. So it goes. Um,
All right, so
First
yeah,
from
so
that,
new
we have a couple
animation
of things.
coming. Yeah, a couple other things coming soon. Including something very soon. I don't know if you watched the first season of Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. This was, something that was I got a lot of acclaim on Netflix. I thought the show itself was good. Evan Peters as Jeffrey Dahmer was phenomenal. I mean, he just was creepy. He was exactly what you'd want as part of that show. Again, the show itself was good. So now season 2 of Monster is coming out in less than a month, September 19th, going to focus on the Menendez brothers, who famously back, I think in the early 90s, killed their parents. Sorry, 1996, killed their parents. The parents in the show are being played by Javier Bardem, Chloe Sevigny, and then 2 completely new actors going to play the son. So, if you're a fan of the first season, again, I'm not sure we'll get a performance quite like Evan Peters, but season 2 of Monster coming in less than 4 weeks.
Yeah, an entirely different story. I didn't watch the Dahmer one. I do recall there being quite a lot of buzz around that when it came out. A lot of people were watching it and enjoying it. I always have somewhat mixed feelings about some of this true crime stuff.
Mm,
Like, is it exploitative? Is it
yeah.
glamorizing? I mean, just these are run of the mill criticisms or worries.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but this does look
There
like
were
it might
some
be pretty
creative
good with this good
licenses on the
cast.
first season, certainly. Yeah.
Right, and that just creates a little worry about the creative license. I don't know. Anyway, people get really fascinated about this kind of stuff, certainly, and that's fair. And yeah, the cast here is good. Javier Bardem, Chloe Sevigny.
Yeah, I mean those two obviously
Yeah,
stand out as phenomenal choices. We don't know anything about these other. It's funny to see. We read Hollywood Reporter to see 2 actors in a story, and there's no link on their name because there's nothing about them. Nothing exists. There's no background. There's no story. There's nothing that they have that they've appeared in. So Nicholas Alexander Chavez and Cooper Koch going to portray brothers Lyle and Eric Menendez. This is a fascinating story. Obviously, sort of gripped the nation. This was the
yeah.
next big trial after OJ, in the
The trial of the
mid to
century.
late 90s. Yeah. So this is,
Yeah,
I'm gonna be interesting to see what they do. But to your point, let's see how far they go with it.
yeah, and it'll be interesting, in terms of what you mentioned, because I would think that the Menendez brothers themselves would be the main characters in this show.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that
Yeah.
goes. Hopefully, it's good.
So Monster season 2 coming September 19th, and then another one that is way out in the future. But we do know that this show has been picked up. We do know that this is coming to Peacock from the creators of Ozark. Tell me if you've heard this before. A series about a family running drugs for someone named Etta Tiger Jones. So it sounds like we're starting off the same premises as Ozark, but then we're going to get into a lot more things where something happens to the family and there's some revenge and justice that flows in. So Peacock said, "Oh, yes, the guys that created Ozark, you're going to create another drug running family story. We want it, no pilot, straight to series."
Yeah, people will watch it, and
Exactly.
someone's going to go missing or something. Is that why it's called this?
Yeah, I would presume so. MIA is the name of the series. Family running who runs drugs, but some members of the family are slaughtered. So there's your premise.
Oh, Okay, then.
So there's your twist off of Ozark. They well,
If
no
you liked
Ozark.
Ozark, you may enjoy MIA coming to Peacock sometime. Uh, cool. So I mentioned it briefly with Oprah. Did you watch any of the DNC Democratic National Conventions going on all week? Did you watch any of this?
This has become a catch the clips thing for me. I did not sit down and watch any speeches.
I mean, that's probably healthier. I probably watched more of it than I needed to personally. But I mean, I think a couple things stood out. And if you watch some clips, maybe you
Hmm.
saw these clips. So I mean, just to talk, I don't want to get into. We're not going to get into political analysis here, okay? But this is like a cultural event. Yesterday, everyone thought Beyonce was going to show up.
Yeah.
TMZ put out a story saying that Beyonce was going to show up, and Beyonce did not show up.
Yes. Randomly saw as I was looking at some NFL betting lines that the betting markets had it at one point as a 99% certainty that Beyonce was going to show up and perform. And man, you could have made some money on that.
Yeah, we got hoodwinked. You're on social media, I mean, I don't know. I was seeing things on Blue Sky. I'm just imagining that there were similar things on X. Um, and how this happened, it really seems like someone started the rumor, and then it was such a plausible rumor, everyone just believed it, including TMZ, and no one
Exactly.
came out
Yeah.
to deny it. I mean, ultimately, I think Beyonce's people did deny it, but this was already like into the evening, 7 or 8
Exactly.
p.m.
Yeah.
or something. Um,
I saw
so
something that there was a post where one of the reporters who was given early access into the room posted that they were giving out DNC bracelets, which were similar to the ones that you would get when you went to a Taylor Swift concert. So then that started the Taylor Swift rumors, right? So just this whole mess of things that didn't end up happening. We got Pink and Pink's daughter, but no Beyonce or Taylor Swift.
right, we did the one. I believe this was a surprise musical guest
Yes.
was earlier in the week when they did what I found to be a really enjoyable roll call. I don't know if you watched this.
I
I
think
was
I know where you're
watching it
going. Go
live.
ahead.
I don't know if I would watch it all. I don't know if I would watch all of it as a clip, but maybe people might. But it was a little bit cheesy. They're playing a distinctive song. They had a DJ and they were playing a distinctive song for each state, usually by an artist from that state, as I figured
Yeah.
out as we worked into it. But did you see this? That Lil Jon showed up for Georgia?
Yeah, he did Georgia, right?
Mm-hmm. He's
He just
from
popped up
Georgia.
out of the crowd and started rapping. Yeah.
Started singing
I
"Get
mean, it's pretty
Low."
great. I mean, frankly.
It was. I thought it was wonderful because it was like as soon as Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz as her vice president, and I think all sorts of people our age started somehow singing to ourselves some version of "From the Window to the Walls."
Yeah,
And so they actually did it, man.
they did
Little
it.
John showed up and he sang, he altered the line to VP Harris, Governor Walls. Um, so I don't know. I also saw someone on social media saying it was vibrantly cringe, but that's
I mean,
fine.
aren't they all? I mean, all of these things are cringe.
Yeah, go for it. Go for
Yeah.
it. The other thing that relates a bit to television as a viewing experience, did you see the Keenan Thompson bit?
No, I haven't seen Kenan Thompson since the Olympics. I didn't know he did anything.
Yeah, so what they did was it was like each night they had a little section that was like a reading from Project 2025. And I believe it was on Wednesday night. The person leading it was Keenan Thompson.
Oh, okay.
And it was pretty funny. And I almost thought he was going to break into what's up with that, but that didn't happen. But it felt almost implicit.
Yeah.
So
Oh
that's a
man,
clip.
that'd been great. Jason Sudeikis dancing in a tracksuit. Yeah, that'd been awesome.
Yeah, that I was. You could almost feel like, is that going to happen? They had Little John last night. Are they gonna? But they didn't fully do it. Instead, it was like Kenan Thompson had someone he was chatting with through video, and they would say something about themselves, and then Kenan Thompson would
Yeah.
be like, "Oh, that's great. I have some bad news. On this page of Project 2025, it says they're going to end the Department of Education." So
Oh boy. Okay.
I don't know. It was pretty funny a little bit. Not very long. I'm sure you can find the clip on
I
YouTube.
missed the clips of that. I'll have to check those out now. But yeah, part of me says, these things are just pomp and circumstance. Glad they're over. But there's always some entertaining stuff that comes out of them, certainly.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, who it's interesting to me because you'll see that the ratings are pretty high, you
Yeah. Oh
know,
yeah.
20 million people or what have you.
Yep.
Uh, at the same time, it's like 20 million Democrats probably are watching the DNC.
Exactly.
It's not like, but they still feel the need to trot out some Republicans and stuff like that.
Right.
That
Right.
happened, it was a mixed bag. But anyway, there were some fun moments, so I thought that was worth mentioning. And then we also did get an extended speech from Oprah Winfrey, which was a political speech. Uh,
Yes, she did.
an
Yes,
endorsement of
she
theirs. So
did go that
um
way. Yeah, so the only other thing I've been watching this week, apart from just some general things we've been talking about. So in three different circles, I had three different people recommend a show to me called Your Honor, which has two seasons on Showtime on
so with
Paramount
Bryan
Plus.
Cranston.
This is Bryan Cranston
Mhm.
as a New Orleans judge who's sort of walking the line between his morals and being corrupt. I've checked out a few episodes of this. This show in the first episode, I mean, starts out at 100 miles an hour, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm hooked. I mean, Bryan Cranston is phenomenal, as you would imagine. But
Of
just the
course.
story that he is entangled in, oh my gosh, is quite good. So for all the people that recommended this to me, so far halfway through the first season, I'm loving it. I have not looked as to whether there's going to be more. For some reason, I think that there will only be these two seasons of Your Honor, but I now looked at it and thinking, man, I hope that's not true because this is I mean, you've been craving some Bryan Cranston, since the end of Breaking Bad and his cameos other places, but this is certainly scratching that itch for me right now.
Well, yeah, I may have to check this out at some point. This is one of those, for some reason, it feels like there are certain shows that, and usually they are on Showtime or sometimes they're on Stars.
Mm, yeah,
And it just seems like no one talks about them ever, you know. But
yeah,
then you'll come across and be like, wait, there's a Bryan Cranston show on Showtime, and
exactly. Like I
it
remember
has
hearing about
multiple
it.
seasons. But
Yeah, it's like, why didn't I check this out? Because this is, I think, came out in 3, 4 years ago. The first season did, and man, I'm sad I waited this long to check it out. But it starts out very well.
cool. Yeah, I'll check that out at some point. Big fan of Bryan Cranston. Although last year, this is a tangent. I revisited Malcolm in the Middle briefly last summer,
Yeah, yeah,
and I was thinking that I would write an article on it because we've on TV Obsessive been trying to sort of launch this summer rerun series where we
mhm,
revisit stuff, and we have a few articles on that which are good. And so I was going to do Malcolm in the Middle because I was thinking, oh man, back in the day, I really loved Malcolm in the Middle, and that was a really funny show, and Bryan Cranston is
yeah.
in it, and all of that. And I went back and I watched a few episodes, and I was like, we're laughing at child abuse, and
Oh,
I couldn't manage to write the article because it was still funny in ways, but then in other ways, I was like, this is not okay. But I didn't
yeah,
want to write an article that was just like slamming it for not being okay. So I just ended up dropping it.
yeah.
But it really was kind of like, I don't know, man, this is kind of an abusive household.
Now that's interesting. That's interesting because I have not watched that show in a long time. One of my kids just got into watching it. Now I'll have to. No, I don't think there's. I mean, how much there are in terms of adult themes and all that. I don't really recall. Like, am I doing a
it's
disservice to
not
my kids?
it's not so much that as
Yeah.
like people might even take issue with me putting it in the way I just put it. Another reason I dropped the article, and now I'm deciding to randomly talk about it on the podcast. But it's not so much that is like you get an episode where I forget it was her name was Lois, I think, the mom,
Hmm.
and she had discovered that her dress had been ruined, and she was consistently punishing the kids until they admitted who had done it, you
Okay.
know? And all of this is played for laughs, and there are laughs available, But at the end of the day, none of them did it. They were telling the truth throughout. It was Hal who did it, and she never finds out that it was actually her husband who ruined her dress. And so it's like, okay, this half-hour sitcom is just, I don't know, the dynamic of it. I felt like, yeah, I don't know. It gave me some mixed feelings in terms of what the point of that sitcom is, sort of in the dysfunctionality of the family that loves each other anyway.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel great about it in retrospect in terms of what it was putting forward. So I don't know.
All right. Well, there's
I'm not saying your kids shouldn't watch it.
shouldn't watch it. I just need to parent better than what they're seeing on this on
Yeah,
screen.
I am suggesting that I don't know if what we're seeing is a family dynamic to be celebrated. You
Yes,
know,
got it.
um,
That makes sense. That makes sense.
so
Well,
um,
speaking of family dynamics that shouldn't be celebrated, we'll get into some of that today, maybe.
yeah. So let's get to it.
Okay.
Lady in the Lake, episode 7. That was my story. Again, this is the finale, presumably series finale. So spoilers will be on the table for everything in Lady in the Lake on the other side of this short musical interlude.
Okay, we are back to talk about episode 7 of Lady in the Lake, the finale, entitled My Story, written by Boaz Yakin, directed by Alma Harrell. A long, lengthy episode with a lot happening to tie up the story. So get right into it here. We start in 1952 when young Cleo and Dora sneak into Shell's club so they can sing in his talent show. Dora does end up singing, but Cleo, because she's the daughter of Al Sherwood, is offered a job as an accountant for Shell. We then flash forward to the night when Cleo was quote unquote murdered. We see that Reggie and Cleo came up with a plan to put Dora, who had overdosed, in Cleo's clothes and dump her in the lake. Back in the present timeline, Cleo does show up in Maddie's hospital room, tries to convince her not to write about her, not to talk about her, not to get involved in the story so that she can stay hidden and not lead to something happening to her. Maddie does, however, convince her that they should be able to tell the story and try to take down Shell at the same time. Maddie then goes to Officer Platt, talks to him about the case, but he's been fired. He wants nothing to do with that story. He wants nothing to do with that life. All he wants to do is run away with Maddie, but Maddie refuses. Maddie wants the story more than a partner, so she convinces the Baltimore Star to let her write it, to let her pursue it. She then goes to visit Slappy in prison. He doesn't believe anything about Cleo being alive, wants nothing to do with her. So on the other side of things, we find out that Reggie has been hiding Cleo, letting her stay with him. Reggie recruits Teddy to get in on a plan with his mom to take down Shell. So Teddy confronts Shell about Reggie working behind his back. While this is happening, Reggie and Cleo, who's dressed up like a man, sneak into the club and burn some of the accounting books. We'll talk about why that may have happened. Teddy confronts Shell and forces him to call the police, confess everything about the numbers game, everything about the Summers assassination attempt. And as a result of all of this, we eventually learn Slappy is set free. Cleo is left to go live the life that she wants. She first gives a mountain of evidence to Maddie so that they can write a story taking down Shell. Maddie ends up not writing a story about Cleo being alive. This allows her to escape to France and assume Dora's identity as a singer. Platt, one more time, interacts with Maddie. he does not want to be just a romantic partner with her. So that leaves her alone to become an author. She writes a book called Lady in the Lake, becomes a bestseller, it seems. She becomes famous, but in the end is left with not much. So a lot of things tied up here, a lot of things maybe not tied up here. What do you think about this episode? The whole con story that happened here? Anything that caught your eye?
I mean, let's start broad first, I guess. Did this did this feel like the same show to you that you've been watching for the past month and a half?
This felt to me like if we were watching 6 or 7 episodes of like a heist show, and this was the culmination of pieces being put together, and we're going to finally do the thing that either takes down the man or gets the thing that we've been trying to get all season. But it's, I get what you're saying, that some of these pieces didn't overlap for me on what we saw the first 6 episodes.
Yeah, I just kind of felt like the tone felt different.
Hmm.
It was wrapping things up and in a way that related to the previous 6 episodes. So it functions as a finale in that regard. But yeah, it kind of felt different, and maybe it is in part that I'm surprised that this is where we were going all along. We kind of called it on previous episodes of the podcast, but I don't feel great about that in a way. That it is indeed the case that Cleo is alive, and Dora did overdose, and um, basically things went right along the lines of what we were laying out before, right? So I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing to say. In some ways, I feel like maybe I was a little bit disappointed that what we had predicted as a kind of speculative possibility is what happened. But then it shifted to feeling like we're watching Ocean's 11 or something
Hmm.
instead of what I thought was really a sad story prior to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. Number one, because I did say, okay, let me sort of flow this from episode 6 to 7. So if you watch episode 6 and 7 back to back, where it's this like total vision dreamscape episode, and then this sort of con that they're running through the majority of episode 7, they do not feel like at all like the same show. So to
Yeah.
that point, it certainly is something where it's we're taking with a big grain of salt here, but yeah, it almost seems like I don't know. I guess this was much more about Maddie's story, quote unquote, and where she was trying to take this whole thing and where she ends up at the end of it because of this thing that happened with Reggie and with Cleo and with Teddy, but it almost then minimized sort of this big reveal and this big thing where they're able to take Shell down. It really was just in service to Maddie being able to write a story and write a book and kind of minimize what should have been probably the critical like elements of telling this story about, which I thought the Cleo side ended up at the end being more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say because I think all of that's true, but then in a meaningful way, it almost felt like Maddie's story was downplayed in this final episode, or was there, but it felt a bit thin. Part of me almost feels like they could have used another episode. Um,
Yeah.
which is odd because at the same time there are things in this episode which I feel like if I were the editor, I might have suggested cutting or trimming down a bit. Like, did we need the first scene of the episode that goes on for minutes and minutes telling us things that we already knew?
Yeah.
Um, I kind of get the idea of, reestablishing something about the relationship between Cleo and Dora. I kind of get what they were doing, but it was actually like pretty long. I think it was going on 10
Yeah.
minutes there for that first scene. And I don't know if we needed to revisit the past of when they first started working at the club. That didn't feel like it did a ton for me. But then at the same time, on the Maddie side, we just kind of we hit the moments of her getting to actually be a reporter, of her and Platt and so on. But felt a little.
Yeah, it almost was like the Maddie pieces were just inserted to make sure that they had parts of her story being told throughout. And yeah, it could have been an episode, this episode trimmed down, one devoted to the Cleo story, and then one devoted to the Maddie story. And I guess, you kind of had at the end had the two of them meet and her turnover stuff so she could write her story and write her book. But maybe that's all that needed to happen in this episode. And then you move on to sort of what life is Maddie left with when she gets what she wants, but she's left lonely and with nothing because of it.
Yes, or something like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you have the scene with Seth
Hmm.
tearing up her diary. I just don't feel like we ever really did get absolute confirmation about who Seth's father is biologically. Unless I
Yep.
missed
Only
it.
only implication, I think, and inference about Alan in previous episodes. It was inferred maybe it was Hal, then it was inferred that it was Alan, but just part of the is this why those diaries are being torn up? Because in the end, that, as we speculated all along, that really doesn't matter. And she
Right, but I
that
feel like what does matter is a big part of the series felt to me as Maddie's story, where the stuff about the past is supposed to tie in along these lines of how she hasn't been living the life that she wants to live
Mhm.
as a writer, as a journalist, as a reporter, because of what happened in the past, because she ended up getting pregnant, getting married to a man she didn't really love,
Mhm.
devoting herself to being a housewife. And now she's taking this opportunity to pursue that dream of being a writer. And that's at least part of why she doesn't want to take Platt up on, his offer.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and it's kind of, it just feels to me like it's all there, but it didn't, at the end of the day, that part didn't come together and land in what really felt like a meaningful way to me. I don't know.
yeah. Maybe it's because I think Maddie says, what she in her first conversation with Platt, I'm not looking for a husband anymore. I think we've gotten the sense of we know what she wants. We know the type of life that she wants to pursue, which is her own agency, her own authority, what she's trying, the things that she wants to really do, which is to be a writer, which is to tell these stories, which is to investigate things and bring some of these things to justice that she's been working on for so long. Maybe it's a sense of maybe a lot of these stories, when the person gets what they want, they sort of are triumphant. I never felt that about Maddie. She's just sort of left with, oh, great, I wrote a best-selling book, which probably is the culmination of everything that she's ever wanted, but she just feels like she looks and feels like there's just nothing there for her anymore.
Yeah. Right. Which I feel like that gets to a kind of question or a kind of tension that could have been explored a little bit more. Instead, it felt a little bit quick. And in her dynamics with Platt, I mean, that felt quick. Then also with her
Yeah.
son, kind of where is
Yep.
that left? That seems a little bit unresolved, or they're going to be a bit more kind of mined from that relationship. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think the episode is bad,
Yeah.
but I didn't love it when it
I,
comes to
I, I
that.
didn't I didn't love it. It told some of the stories it needed to. It tied some things together that it needed to. Um, it felt like, and again, talk about how long it is, that maybe it would have benefited from just did so much in 55 minutes, tried to put so much in there. To your point, why did we need 10 or 12 minutes at the beginning of them getting hooked up with Shell and how that all came about? We know that they've been there forever. We know that they're locked into this and can't leave. So yeah, just there were just a few, it seemed like, pieces of of the strings that would tie these things together, just some of those were missing, maybe in service of other stuff.
Yeah. And then also towards the end, it kind of speed runs what happens in Baltimore for the next 2 years, which we'd hit on and wondered, is the show going to get into
Hmm.
that at all? And it kind of did, but it did in a way where honestly, you'd have to look it up to
Yeah.
actually even know what they were showing you, right? Yeah. It's like, oh man, then I hardly knew this what was going to happen to the city a year later, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, look up the Baltimore riots of 1968. So I mean, that's one thought that I have is that maybe there could have been a way if they'd been given another episode that might have made more sense. It just goes slower,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and dig into some of the stuff a bit more.
Tell
We
more, show
get
more. Yeah, I agree.
we get no return to the Tessie case.
Yep.
I guess we're to believe what Bob said last episode, that Stefan's mother is the one who murdered Tessie, and so on and so forth. And we have no explanation of that Santa Claus scene whatsoever, unless
Yeah.
I
I,
completely
I, I
missed
thought
it, which
I thought about you, and I, was hurting for you this whole time that you, we didn't get an explanation for that. But it is interesting that they went back and showed, in the past, things like the Reggie Cleo conversation after Dora OD'd, and sort of this is exactly what happened. We never really saw or heard, other than Bob's story to Maddie in the hospital, what exactly it is that happened to Tessie. You're right, that was not revisited at all in this episode.
yeah, none at all. So we wrap that up. You
Yeah.
know, we know what happened. Um, so yeah, it just felt like something was missing in a way along those lines, and
Yeah.
with a culmination of Maddie's story, this is also rather quick, right? We kind of jump to, hey, now she's written a book. I guess she's a successful author. Um, how does she feel about her life at that point?
Yeah. And she
Hmm.
almost, you don't have any conversation. Not that we just need an exposition dump at the end of this finale, but you just have nothing but her at a book signing, her noticing the lottery, her noticing, and it just sort of seems like she's not. I mean, I think we're meant to think that she's not content, or she's not or satisfied with what's happened, and maybe that's the case. Maybe that's just how I read it. But there's just nothing there after we see. Okay, we see what life she's pushing aside to get the life that she wants. We just get nothing, no follow up or no sort of meat on that bone.
Right. We can read into her facial expression or things like this. I would imagine that in the novel, there's more depth, there's
Yeah.
more internal monologue kind of stuff. And it does feel like whatever that is, because I haven't read the book, didn't quite make it through on the screen.
Yeah.
And so maybe we are supposed to think, something along the lines of what you were saying. We can note that she has had the falling out with her family.
Hmm.
Her relationship with Seth doesn't seem terribly good as we leave things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've been critical for the most part, but
I mean, there are several good things we can say. I mean, the story told and setting up and taking down Shell, I thought was very interesting. I thought compelling. The decision to involve Teddy, I thought was uh, very surprising, and in the end was an integral part of that whole thing working. Whether or not you agree with telling a child this massive secret and what they do with that information was the right thing to do, but it was, I thought that was a good story. Again, I thought the Cleo Reggie Teddy part was more compelling or at least gave me more of what I was looking for than the Maddie side did.
Yeah, let's talk that through a little bit because what we have is Teddy goes to talk to Shell, and Teddy tells Shell that Reggie has been stealing from him, basically,
Hmm.
right? Reggie's been taking the fixed numbers and having people place bets, and it's a little more convoluted than all that. And it seems clear that the purpose of this is distraction, right? To keep
Yeah.
Shell distracted while Reggie and Cleo pull off their heist arson. Um,
Yeah, I have questions about this, but yes.
yeah, yeah, we can talk about that too. But then it seems like Cleo thinks the plan is that Reggie is going to leave with her.
Yes, I think that
So
her understanding is they will go gather the things they need, take the evidence they're looking for. Um, we are able to then all go, Cleo, Reggie, Teddy, all go and take this to the proper authorities so we can take down Shell. I do not think that she ever anticipated Reggie was going to one-on-one confront Shell the way that they did, and maybe that's a result of how things were kind of crumbling, everybody trying to get out, the fire, all of that. But it seems like they're the ones that started all of that. So this seems to have been Reggie's plan all along. Cleo was just not a part of it.
yeah, I guess that's probably right. But the thing I'm sticking on a little bit is what ultimately happens, I think, makes more sense altogether. And it would make more sense for this to have been the plan, right? Um, Whereas if Reggie had left, and then you'd have this hanging out there that you had Teddy turn Shell against Reggie
Hmm.
just as a distraction.
Yeah.
And man, you've got to have a lot of faith that everything else is going to go your way after that.
Yeah. You're driving straight to the police station asking for protection from that moment. I mean, I presume that's what they would have done. So
But I mean, even then, the police are on the take from Shell.
exactly,
I
exactly.
mean,
It's almost like
so
they were risking that because they knew Teddy had to come up with a story that Shell would be compelled to listen to. Right? Well,
yeah,
he's not going to listen to some kid about some whatever. But if he's got some information about being two-time, then okay, I'll go listen to you.
yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
But I think I guess my point is ultimately just what Reggie did instead,
yeah,
going and confronting Shell and pointing a gun at him and all of that. Um, Better plan,
yes,
except I guess also Reggie, by doing this, confesses to his role in things.
correct, correct, yeah. And I think that he's racked with guilt and so much from what he's had to do for Shell over the years that he just, I don't want to be free. I don't deserve to be free. If we're going to take things down, I deserve to go with it. It's just my understanding of where his mind is at that time.
Yeah, which I wonder about. They do put in there how they shut down Shell's numbers game, and then pretty quickly it gets taken up as an official state lottery.
Yeah.
How much? I don't know. How do you take that? You could ask, how much better is the legal lottery than Shell's numbers game? Or you could ask, how much worse was the illegal numbers game than the state lottery?
Exactly.
If we're okay with one, should we be okay with the other?
That was pretty clearly set up as oh, when the illegal gambler does it or the mobster does it, it's supposed to be perceived a certain way, but when the government does it, well, it's regulated and it's okay, right? We can take your money that way.
Yeah, which maybe, right? Because I
Yeah.
mean, if nothing else, Shell was a bad guy for doing things like killing people and ordering assassination hits on politicians. And, don't want to forget about all of that. But I mean,
Yeah.
look, you could make that argument. I'm sure someone would make this argument rather precisely that if you've got an illegal numbers game, because it's illegal, then violence is going to crop up around it. But if you have a
Hmm.
legalized state lottery, um, you don't get the violence, right? Maybe gambling is still bad, but people are going to do it anyway. You make it legal.
Yeah.
You take some of the money from the state lottery to fund the schools or whatever. I presume they still do that.
Yeah, that certainly was the read I had on it. And Maddie's face when she sees that is almost dejection. Like we worked to try to bring this down, and then the state is just taking it over and looking at this line of people, out in this kiosk that are just there to just throw their money at this. What sort of message that's trying to say. I'm not entirely sure that was what they wanted, but that's just sort of the impression I got from that.
Yeah. And another, I mean, just another level that felt a little underserved to me in terms of all of the stuff we've talked about in past weeks with the racial dynamics and, you know, Shell's argument that what he was doing was to help the black community in Baltimore and so on.
Yeah, yeah,
Which again, also like a murderer, don't want to enter that, but tried to, grapple a bit with the extent to which he had something of a point or an
yeah.
ethos that you could take seriously. Um, they hit on the NSRP last
Yes.
week, but again, if that culminates in this finale, it does so really quickly, almost, in montage almost of like, hey, what happens in the future? But that's okay. You want to talk a little bit about the heist? Why
Yeah,
or why
so
they burned those
so I
ledgers?
have two questions or concerns, I guess, about this, and maybe this is just my so I've tell anybody who listens, Ocean's 11 is one of my favorite movies, but there is a very, very serious problem with how they pulled off that heist. It just bugs me, 23 years later. So I don't know why when I watch these types of things, these types of things stand out and bug me. The number one, this whole plan ended up having to work on someone who was in the room working on the books that ended up being sympathetic to Cleo, this guy Vernon, that let her in. It's like, well, what if he wasn't in there? Or what if, it was someone that, didn't have that feeling towards you? It wouldn't have worked, I guess. You would have been out of luck.
But I did gather on that front that this is how I read it visually, that she thought she was going to be able to get into that room with the key she had,
Hmm.
but they'd replaced the key with a combination lock.
Yes.
And she didn't know that they'd done that. And
Right.
then luckily she was able to get in anyway. So I
Yeah.
don't disagree with what you're saying, but
It's just she wouldn't have been able to get in, but someone that was in there, she had to tell him who she was. And he said, "Oh, okay, well, what you're doing, I agree with. So I'm gonna let you in. And then we're gonna burn the books, which I guess I can only logically believe that they're burning the fake ones that sort of show or cover up the money that's being spread around so that the only thing that exists is the actual books that show where the money really went. That's the only thing I can deduce from that.
that was my read on it.
Okay.
That they were burning the ones, as you say, the fake ones, the cooked ones, as it
Yeah, the
were.
cook the
Yeah,
cookbook
yeah, yeah.
got burned. Yeah,
The ones that you would show the cops.
exactly.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
look, everything's on the up and up. I think so.
Yeah. I mean,
I agree
it
that you
doesn't make sense
can
otherwise because she hands over all this stuff to Maddie at the end. So she had to have some kind of books evidence to give. So they must have burned the ones that they would have otherwise said, "No, look, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what those are. These are our real books."
I think that must have been it. And then I guess the plan was also to burn down the club.
Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I have some quibbles about this plan, Cleo.
Yeah,
Also the idea of her sneaking in by disguising herself as a man. Okay.
yeah.
I mean, you could still tell it was her if I mean, I don't know, maybe if you looked close anyway.
At that point, you're just relying on Teddy as an escort having authority and people just doing what he says.
Reggie, I mean,
Reggie,
yeah,
Reggie, I mean, yeah.
yeah, really. And Shell recognized her, right?
Hmm.
He makes that remark to Reggie. So, you know, um, okay. But
Yeah.
this is the kind of point I was getting at with where we started, that it did feel a little bit to me like we went from this
Yeah.
contemplative show to a kind of be like, "Ba-da-da," and then
I mean, it's sort of
uh,
I would rate it as sort of a B minus heist. It's it's good, it's creative. It definitely had some flaws in places where it seemingly fell apart, but they made it work.
Yeah, and I suppose it's fun. I mean, I'm with you. I'm like a huge fan of a good heist movie, but there aren't really that many.
They're not. No, they all
And
have plot holes.
um Inside Man's quite good. Do you ever see that? It's a Spike
That's
Lee
that's my
joint.
favorite. Yep,
Yeah,
that's my
that's
favorite.
anyhow, it's an aside. Go watch Inside Man.
That's right.
Um so yeah, I mean, let's see, anything else? I do want to hit on, I guess, before you wrap up about Platt. He does reference Loving versus Virginia. I don't know that it makes a ton of sense that he wants to move to Virginia, but we're just gonna let that slide, I think. I mean, you're talking about Loving versus Virginia as a Supreme Court case.
Yes, he references this that if we go there and this wins, maybe we'll get to I'm not quite sure he understands the complexities of what has to happen after that court case happens.
I guess maybe that's how to read it. Or I mean, I was thinking that, it's a Supreme Court case, so that's a national thing. But also that doesn't mean that things change and flipped
Yeah,
on a dime
laws have to still
either in
change. It
terms
takes
of
time. Yeah.
cultural acceptance of interracial couples and all of
Yes.
that, which he knows. And I did think this is part of, not to nitpick your summary too much, but part of what I felt in that scene where she goes to visit him, um, and says she's moving to her new place, and she doesn't want to be a wife again, but he could come visit, or
Yeah,
however she puts that exactly. Um, he asks her if she's going to let him in the front door.
that's right. That's right. Yep.
And she doesn't really answer that question, but her face says, "I don't know about that." And I think that was a key element to that scene, just to
To
note
which
this, that
he says, "Forget it. Never. We're not doing this anymore." Yeah.
right, because Platt is now saying that he is willing and wants to be in a relationship with her in the open and take all of the risks that
Exactly.
involves, you know. And so if Maddie isn't willing to do that, then he's not interested. We're done at this
Yep.
point. No more,
Exactly right.
no more sneaking in the window, um, and all of that. So that's something to think about in terms of the decision that Maddie makes to prioritize what she's prioritizing in terms of,
Yes. Yes.
um, writing and her public image and all of that.
Yeah. I think that's exactly how I read it. Yep.
Cool. So, anything else you want to hit on here before we wrap this up?
No, I think that's it. I am glad we did this show. It was certainly unique, certainly different than a lot of things we can find on Apple TV Plus otherwise. So I mean, it was a good show to cover.
Yeah, there were a lot of great things about the show. And again, this includes the music. Did you notice, Ryan, that the song that played during the end credits of the finale was ever so slightly different from the song that's in the opening credits of the series?
And I did not.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, was there a
You
reason for
go
that?
you go listen to it. I don't know. I enjoy the song. So, it ended, it faded, cut to black, and I just sat there listening to the song. But it's basically the same song, but it's a little bit different.
Okay, I'll
So
go
I
check
don't
that
know.
out. I'm gonna make myself a note.
Yeah, I did enjoy the music in the series. It was well done. It's well acted. It's a good story. Didn't quite know that it was going to end with a heist,
Yeah, exactly.
and I don't know how I feel about that. But okay, this is what it is, and I have no regrets about watching it. I've been enjoying talking about it with you for the past
Yeah, nor do I. Great,
month and a
good,
half.
yeah,
So
good show to dissect. Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, please do leave a good rating, review, that sort of thing. If you're on YouTube, give a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Pop over to TVObscast.com. You want to read some articles about TV? Follow the site on social media. Look for TV Obsessive on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and so on. And next week, we're going to check out Homicide: Life on the Street, which has just come to Peacock.
Yes, very excited.
Widely acclaimed show, critically acclaimed. Everyone says it's great. We've never seen it, but we're going to check it out, and that's what we talk about next week. Hope you all will join us.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into the first season, see how far we get, but very excited about watching the show for the first time because it's now available for the first time.
Peacock.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
it's
it
been.
is.
I think it's been available on DVD. We've hit on
Yeah,
this
if you,
before.
if you wanted to buy
Where
the DVD box set, you could get it. Yeah.
there's a little bit of a barrier to entry in terms of saying, "Hey, I heard the show is good. I'm just going to buy the DVD box set." But it's available on Peacock. So we're going to check it out a bit, and we'll be back next week.
That sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Okay, see you then.